Welcome to the new Kevin Smith, The Great Witness show. The New Adventure series is. It's March 9th, 2022. I'm Dean Bell here with Dean Kevin. And Kevin will be sharing his real side experiences with us. So hi, Kevin.
In this real side experience, I would find myself in what I might best describe as a kind of cyberspace computer game like realm, as creation is in actuality a simulation effected from the consciousness. Really then, what I was experiencing would be somewhat a simulated realm within the consciousness effected simulation. The recreational computer games humans play are based on the same principles in their design, in that what is decided are the files, the data that makes up the game. Then the computer mechanics decodes the data and renders it on the screen as our gaming experience. The creational simulator is practically the same, in that what is individually decided and indeed collectively agreed upon becomes the consciousness. The consciousness then effects the means of experiencing its design, body vehicles that have the apparatus to decode the idea agreements into simulated reality. So effectively, everything experienced in a computer game we might play is contained on a relatively small monitor screen, and yet renders entire cyberspace worlds that with today's gamers can be as large as actual creational simulated worlds. And the processing of the ideas generates the illusion of distance travelled and time passed, and yet everything of the game, every data bit that makes it up, is present in the computer in its entirety, and only the computer operator goes through the individual effected or rendered steps or stages of experience, the sequences of emotion. And so it is in reality that everything the consciousness comprises of is present in every now moment, and according to the agreements through the overall consciousness as they stand moment to moment, dictates the effected creational simulator and all its multi-dimensional leveled nature. And as it is our body vehicles that decode the consciousness into a simulation, the overall consciousness that affects the overall creational arena, and each individual consciousness that affects each individual's additional creational experience within this shared arena, then everything we experience, as huge as creation seems to be, exists only in a small part of our apparatus, in the brain, just like the monitor screens that present entire gaming worlds with the same step-by-step cause-to-effect time sequences of ideas to experiences that present the illusion of emotion and distance. And yet in reality, motion, distance doesn't exist. It's just that the entirety of everything creational, effected from the consciousness, is presented in a sequence, as this is how creation has been decided to be, as according to the consciousness that affects the apparatus that perceives it in this way, as really every idea presents as a vehicle by which awareness is encased within it, and we experience the simulation of the idea. And if the idea, the vehicle, the consciousness is agreed upon as to simulation that presents as a cause to effect time phases, then this is what we experience if we are operating through such vehicles. And irrespective of our degree of recognition and awareness, we are still resigned to the design of the simulation as effected from the vehicle, idea, or consciousness encasement we choose to view through. And so really this density of the physical only came into being, as everything must, through decision, as a reflection of the consciousness and its degree of overall awareness or lack of it. And so really the more unawareness, the more unconsciousness through the beings that reside and effect each simulator, the more this is reflected in the structure of the creational realm they are in, and additional levels of density, the physical level, etc., become so in accordance with escalating unconsciousness and unawareness, where at one point the astral level was the lowest, literally speaking, life level, and due to the current degree of unconsciousness and unawareness made apparent by the effected simulator going into darkness and deteriorating, so this does present the very real possibility of further levels of creational density being established, and at this time this well appears to be in the form of technological life levels within the overall simulator, which would hypothetically be additional life levels, being on the physical, yet potentially locked into another dark force created cyberspace simulation through technology, and to the extent that although such virtual realities can be experienced now, at least we have the option to remove the headsets or switch off the gaming computers. What the dark forces envisage is locking humanity into these additional created cyberspace realities from cradle to grave, like in the movie The Matrix, that the human race would be oblivious to this situation they find themselves in, and indeed through the technology would their very idea generating body vehicles be controlled also, their free will hijacked. Even with the computer games available now, the emotional attachment that can be applied to them. The agreements, through the attention and focus they trawl, can very readily project individuals into such worlds and augmented virtual realities, if not in the current lifetime, which indeed all the massive agreement and attachment to computer gaming is fastly helping in facilitating the effecting of the controller's ability to lock humanity into these additional simulations, and relatively soon. But should this not unfold, if these attachment agreements are not addressed and released, individuals will find themselves projecting into worlds and creational areas not dissimilar to the nature and themes of the games they indulge in. For we always decide our experience, and what claims our focus, attention, and agreement are ideas that we will experience the effects of, if not this lifetime, then in the lifetimes to come. And these cyberspace gaming worlds are very much creational realities now, just as any other spot in creation. For anything we imagine, decide, and agree with effect as a simulated reality instantly on the real side, including computer games, and maintained agreement will maintain then these created creational areas on the real side, and indeed can more likely then have them become physical level happenings also. The agreements facilitating the controller's ability to create the mechanics by which they can lock their slaves into simulated realities on the physical level. And even were these not yet physical level, matrix movie-like computer game virtual realities, and even if these computer game-like worlds were not now effected as actual creational positions individuals can find themselves in future lifetimes, what with real side simulation being whatever we decide it to be, so with the fixation on computer gaming, so individuals can lock themselves within such simulated realities of their own devising, limiting themselves rather than exploring the multi-dimensionality of creation as it effects from the consciousness, and beyond that into a continuous awareness and recognition of the everything life is. They would effectively still be multi-dimensional, as we all are, but enclosed and self-limited in their illusions that they are as such, even though they would be potentially perceivable by all others who share the multi-dimensionality of creation with them. It would be a case of all others who are not so self-limited could see them, but the encased simulated individual cannot see these other individuals. And then the only way to be perceivable and engage with such encased individuals would be through a direct agreement that we can enter whatever simulation they have decided for themselves on the real side, and if not, the best we can do is simply observe them. And so, I have had a number of real side experiences in regards to these computer game-like realms and real side areas, and as I said, they can be anything from actual projected creational areas that are as potential incarnational physical areas to a real side simulation based on the agreements, focus, and attention on computer games, etc., and incorporate varying numbers of individuals from a collectively effected simulation to individual. And oftentimes we may be shown these situations just to experience them and to share what we have been shown, to validate and verify the various occurrences in creation for others to be aware of. And if we are simply to be shown, then this is rather easy, through a real awareness that is through all consciousness. Everything being this one overall isness awareness, and therefore all consciousness is created and animated by this all awareness, and therefore everything effected from this all consciousness, all ideas and agreements, our real awareness can show the personal self the simulation of, and nothing then creational is beyond the reach of the real awareness view, regardless of how locked into these tight simulated real side illusions within the overall simulator individuals may be. But as I said, if we actually want to enter these self-confined simulated areas on the real side, if we need to engage with such individuals, for whatever reason, they must agree to the ideas of others that they can feature in their enclosed simulation. You can't just enter another's game unless you're dealing with the open shared simulator arena, where already exists agreement between all consciousness that affects it, and so anyone can enter anyone else's presence, as agreements that this can be so already are established by virtue of the fact that consciousness overall affects the simulator. So the ideas that affect the simulator's base template are shared, and what is shared by all idea-wise is what is experienced by all. This overall simulator stadium we all operate within. But as I said, individuals can lock themselves down into encased simulation within this overall simulator arena, and then we rather need to find a key, agreements that allow us access. The real awareness then, if it rather wants the personal self to enter such enclosed, simulated areas, if it makes sense with life and awareness overall to do so, it will determine where these agreements can be found throughout all the consciousness. if an individual agrees with another, it is effectively two consciousnesses of ideas that now are somewhat interwoven, a kind of combining of two consciousnesses. And like any idea, if we agree to it, we experience the effects of it. And as we agree to the consciousness of another, we have it rather uploaded to our own consciousness, which then always presents as the effected vehicle of the individual we have agreed with to feature in our experience, that their awareness can utilize this vehicle idea to operate through. And so, if I have maintained agreement with another, regardless of how enclosed they are within their real side decided simulations, I always can potentially enter their experience. And agreements are very much interwoven and intermeshed throughout all consciousness, and even though we may not have a direct agreement with someone, we may have agreement with an associate of theirs, someone else they have agreement with also. And so we rather can enter the simulation of others this way indirectly, piggybacking on agreements we and our target share, a backdoor agreement. For the consciousness our target agrees with includes agreement to our consciousness also, so the target has taken on the consciousness, extended agreement to another. As a consciousness we agree to everything, every idea it contains, including all agreements to the ideas of other consciousnesses. So we always are potentially agreeing with far more individuals than we realize, as we agree with what seems to be a single individual. But really, as I said, the real awareness goes about the particulars. It finds these agreement doors and accesses them where and if necessary. And so I would find myself, as I said, in this enclosed computer game-like realm on the real side, and contained within were a vast number of individuals who, through their collectively shared agreements, had effected themselves into such a place. It was an endless array of levels and sections, just like a computer game where you work your way through escalating tiers of achievement to reach a goal or objective. I wouldn't fully explore it in its entirety, but my real awareness, afforded impressions, assured me of its vastness and multi-leveled nature. As I proceeded, I would actually encounter some old school associates that, although I hadn't maintained connection with on the physical, very likely these were the very agreement windows that had allowed me access. As we go through a creation, we forge our agreements with every individual we encounter, for naturally we wouldn't have encountered them had there not been agreement that had them feature directly in our experience. That we all share the overall simulator is a given, but for someone to directly be in our presence, if they are school or work associates, then there are then far more agreements of ideas that correspond than, say, those that are shared between an alien from the other side of creation and a human, as the more corresponding shared ideas, the more they must effect corresponding shared experience, and we find ourselves in the same countries, streets, schools, etc. And all these associations we make lifetime after lifetime, for the unconscious, unaware individual. These are all agreements and attachments never released, and even though perhaps consciously individuals may become detached from each other on the physical, the agreements will be maintained unless completely recognized and decided as to their release, and if not, then can potentially affect future lifetime situations where the individuals move into association with each other again. And so, even as those on their awareness processes may be releasing these agreements to all individuals we have agreements with through the consciousness, these individuals will be retaining their own until such time as they go about their own awareness process, if indeed they decide to. And it is these maintained agreements from others to us that we can then utilize, that the real awareness determines, and can have its personal self effected into the target simulation on the real side. And indeed, these old school associates would recognize and greet me, but seemed somewhat resigned to a certain part of this curious real side computer game realm. As it transpired, my objective was to reach what was construed then as the top level or business end of this place, and I would transition through various areas of it until I reached the location that my impressions afforded me was the top tier or level, and it was a vast chamber, almost like a cave, with streams of lava flowing throughout, and as I proceeded, I assumed a completely different form, as I approached a central raised section that on top of seemed to be a kind of a throne, as though designed for a royal posterior. Having ascended this raised section, I had an audience then with a woman, and she seemed to present as though the most highly placed individual in this computer-like realm. And although she realized I was assuming a different outer form, it was as though this was an expected protocol, that one couldn't approach her in their usual body forms, for whatever reason this might be. The reason wasn't made apparent to my personal self, but unless I went along with this, my audience with her would not be granted, so why complicate matters? I was also wearing a very elaborate garment that again was expected that I adopt. My impressions were that through the overall agreement with all the vast numbers of individuals within this computer game-like area, that this had rather opened them up to this woman, and her creating of this very computer game-like place, and providing all occupants that which they effectively had decided to experience, consciously or unconsciously. That, yes, everyone can create whatever they want to experience, but it's just as easy to agree and experience the creations of others if they are along the lines of what we desire, and this seemed to be the case here, as though she had rather trolled all computer gaming orientated humans into agreement to be within this created real side computer style game matrix, like a mini matrix within the overall simulator arena. I had the impression she wasn't in any way Dark Force affiliated, that indeed she had no ill intent or malicious inclinations, but also that she was a typical personal self-immersed and consciousness-embracing individual, with no interest or recognition of anything beyond creation, of her real awareness, the is, etc. But she evidently was aware to an extent. She was quite clearly a talented real-side creator, and rather instrumental in garnering agreement for her creation, as my impressions were that she simply craved positions and situations where she was the top individual within her created matrix-like games that she provided for all those that were agreeable to be a part of. And despite her nature that she wasn't ill-intended, her activities still were really of no real benefit, awareness speaking, as everything she did then was very creationally focused and orientated, and didn't in any way reference or point to the ears. And so then, all she was doing was just keeping the agreeable individuals cycling in creation. And so she would rather go on to openly confirm what my impressions had revealed as to the setup and situation, and also state that this simulated creation of hers was very old, but she had always updated it in keeping with the wants of those agreeable to be a part of it. And indeed, the area she resided in, which even though was rather the top tier, did have an ancient look about it, what with it being a cave, lava flowing through it, etc., and an area that was out of bounds except by special invite only, and quite clearly she had willingly accepted my presence, providing I altered my form and adorned an elaborate outfit. This would of course present as an opportunity, for we are predominantly extending the real opportunity of the ears to all in the simulator, irrespective of body type or decided consciousness. And when it comes to individuals like this woman, who seemed somewhat influential, talented, and more aware, such individuals can be very instrumental when it comes to sharing and promoting the ears and with the galactic activities, etc., if indeed they decide to step up. And she would have the ear, so to speak, of the vast numbers of humans in this created gaming realm, and maybe other species too, though my impression was that they were predominantly human, and indeed the numbers of humans within it were around the billions. As I said, it was as though she had garnered all agreeable, gamer-orientated humans, and although she was only available through special invite to the participants, they all were aware of her and that she ruled this created, simulated matrix-type game on the real side. So, should she decide to step up, it's very conceivable she would bring along, or attempt to, all the billions that played in her creation. For of course, as we step up, we recognize the importance of sharing the ears to all we can, and so naturally all her gamers would be apprised of the real references should she decide to begin her own process of awareness. And this then would have been the reason for the real awareness inserting the personal self into this curious creation. For always we must initially approach individuals through the personal self first, as the disconnect they have with the real awareness that they are is maintained until the personal self decides to re-establish this connection. For although the personal self was necessary to create the comparison through experiences generated and the establishing of the two states of being, the nowness real state of the ears, real awareness everything, and the ideas and encapsulated parts through the created, simulated, personal self position to recognize the real awareness, and through the real awareness, the ears, the real awareness is a part of, the free will of the personal self can be now either a tool for this process, the deciding to align itself with the real intent, or a detriment, in that the personal self may free will decide to remain floundering in creation. But either way, the personal self must be approached first on the physical or the real side, and then decide. And ultimately, free will is rather disregarded also, for free will is the personal self deciding something, and eventually, as we move into this real awareness position, the true reality it is a part of is not a place where free will can reside. For what would you be free will deciding when you are, the isness reality that is everything. For what would you be free will deciding when you are the isness reality that is everything? What would you need to decide, or consider, or create? And if you do create something, this is something that isn't this everything reality. And to experience something that isn't everything, the only way this can be done is to encapsulate this something that you have chosen to create, to take a part of the everything and experience it independently, which can only be done in creation through vehicles that can contain these somethings, these pieces, and provide them as encapsulated experiences. So eventually we free will decide to not use free will, and this would be rather a kind of a final decision on the part of the personal self. For at the point where we are no longer free will creating, we are embodying the isness everything position we actually are, and the identity of the woman was never revealed, although it's conceivable she may have represented some form of AI. For there are numerous expressions of the AI throughout the physical and interdimensionally on the real side. There seem to be a number of rogue programs also, in a way, and she did proclaim how her creation was very old, as indeed these AI systems have been in operation for billions of years of so-called time, and only now are encroaching directly into human experience. And she did say she had to constantly update her creations according to the species and their requirements, as though she may have remolded her creation so it aligns more so with the kind of computer game themes most of the billions of humans that play them currently prefer. The experience ended there, but I will briefly mention that over the course of several nights I was observing the activities of a very demonic type character of considerable creational ability. I would observe him from my real awareness, aside from the simulation view, and so I could observe him, but he would be oblivious of me, and that he was being watched. He did what most ill-intended demonic character consciousnesses do. I won't go into details. It was rather graphic, as he went about tormenting, attacking, abusing all those that through agreements in their consciousness allowed that he could. For as is always the case in creation, nothing can occur unless we allow it, unless we agree to it, unless we extend permission to our abusers, and much of the agreements will be subconscious. But there was a certain point where it's as though all of a sudden he became bored with his chosen way of being. For indeed this is why many of the dark forces do what they do. So bored of creation are they will go to extremes of behavior to alleviate it, to dominate a species, to blow up planets, etc. And we must remember that all body types, all consciousness, no matter how ill-intended, are real awareness animated, and that, as all real awareness is, has the singular, real purpose objective to recognize the is, it is a part of. And also, as in the case with the woman and her computer game like real side creation, these characters can be very potentially influential if they do step up, as they are natural risk takers, and all the influence and agreement they manage and manipulate and abuse can now be turned around to be beneficial if they then step up and present the ease. And this seemed to be the case here, that evidently this very demonic character of influence was on the verge of absolute boredom in creation, and so the real awareness had the personal self watching him and his ill-intended activities for a number of nights, as though the real awareness recognized the demon's impending potential change of decided direction, as the real awareness can read all ideas through all consciousness, as the real awareness is a part of all awareness that is through all consciousness, and could read then the ideas the demon was generating. And at the pivotal moment, on around the third night, on the real side or so, the real awareness inserted its personal self into the simulated side, into the presence of this demon, and I rather engaged with now a demonic character very open to the ease references and opportunity I afforded him. And indeed, as I impressioned his sincerity, so would I also assist in a beneficial altering of his consciousness, in ways I have described before, where the guides, Dwayne, etc., have made alterations to the personal self-consciousness that benefit the individual, where it makes sense to do so, and if agreements are extended, and this often can be represented with the guides making adjustments to the personal self-consciousness, represented by house alterations on the real side, as I have shared on previous experiences. And indeed, on a real side experience I shared on a previous show, was I also performing a consciousness alteration that allowed a species of assorted beings to be liberated from agreements that facilitated constant attacks by another species. And so it was here that I spent a considerable portion of a real side night making such adjustments to this demon's consciousness that would benefit him and his choice to begin his own journey of ease recognition. For every being is precious, regardless of the decisions they have made. That yes, a demonic, ill-intended consciousness will be rather a dark consciousness of agreements to be faced and released, and perhaps a more arduous task than an individual who has, say, spent most lifetimes as a slave consciousness, but nevertheless, as I said, such a character also would now be very influential, a natural risk-taker, and can quite conceivably move through their process very swiftly. And so it will be interesting to see what comes of this. And in regards to the creationally gifted woman also, who may well have been some form of AI.
Wunderbar. It's interesting that Gwen and I saw a movie last night called Anon. Take it to the end, it could be anonymous, but it was all about the future and how everybody is hooked up to the AI, basically. You walk down the street and you see through your eyes everybody's profile, basically, their age, what they do, like a rundown of who they are. You can just stare at them and you get this information. Everybody's hooked up, basically. There's no privacy. And then there's this detective that, well, there's some murders that happen and they can't, this is a spoiler alert. This is a 2018 movie called Anon, A-N-U-N. There's some murders taking place, and usually you can, by the way, you can share information. I can share my pictures to you, Kevin. If you ask for them, I can share some memories, images. We can share images back and forth because we're hooked up. But in this murder, they can't determine. Usually, you can see in the victim's eyes who came to murder them, but they couldn't. It was from the other way around. The murderer somehow hacked the system, and you couldn't see who was doing it. So there was an anonymity to this case that the detective was trying to solve. So there was this femme fatale, this lady that he saw walking down the street, and it was like, it said error on it because there wasn't any stats on her. So he found her, and then they had a relationship basically going on where, you know, he thought she was trying to kill him to avoid being caught, etc., because he thought she was the killer. As it was, she's being controlled by somebody else, one of the other cops. But the idea here is everybody was hooked up. There's absolutely no privacy. Everybody, it's all exposed. Kind of, you know, we're all in a simulator. In a way, our real awareness, can see everything too. If we're capable, we can see basically everything. But in the simulator, you need technology or some kind of tool to do that with. Where this movie kind of demonstrated that. It was kind of interesting. And then the Ukraine situation. There's this computer company, the video company, that's suing the newscaster, the particular newscaster, because they're providing images for the news people of the bombings in Ukraine. Well, these are all computer simulated images from a video game. So, I mean, that's where we are. And in this movie too, there was a point where this detective was getting images sent to his field of vision, and they were nightmarish. He couldn't determine whether they're real or not. Somebody was trying to, he'd go in an elevator, and the image would be the elevator was, there was a floor, but really it's just a shaft. So if he would have stepped in there, he would have fallen. So there's all these projections of fires in the hallway, dogs attacking him. He couldn't distinguish what was real and what was not, because he was being hacked, and this is where we're going with the chip, and everybody's you know, eventually possibly going to be hooked up already. It's happening with the vaccines and all. So anyway, yeah, this company, video company, is suing the newsreels, the newscasters, for using their images. And as you're doing, Kevin, you know, the Real Guides, you and others are looking for people's agreements here and on the Real side. And anybody who listens, basically, or is open to listening, to agree to becoming more aware. I mean, they're going to approach them and work with them. So it's all there, the availability to get out of this prison, this matrix that we're in. It's there, but people have to take the step to do it. And this person this being that you're talking about, we'll see what, you know, happens with him. That most evil ones can turn and take their followers with them and become more aware. It's kind of cool the way it works. So yeah, I think that's it for me. If you got anything, Ron, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll go on, Kevin.
Well, I'm kind of curious. Kevin, can you say or describe what this guy looked like? The nasty guy.
It wasn't such a visual experience, more impressions, but I would imagine I can something along the lines of what you'd typically imagine a demon to be as depicted in the movies. He was quite large, quite muscular. He had claws and such. He had horns. He had a sort of like a very sort of reptilian type face, things of that nature. Yeah.
It was obvious then.
Well, I mean, he looked like what he was basically. Yeah.
Okay. This guy that I saw, that he was slender, and his suit was well tailored to his body. And he had a row of buttons from about where his crotch is all the way up to here, just a solid row of buttons. And it was weird. I assume he was able to pull emotions out of me, which surprised me.
What was that? A real side experience you had?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's when he did that. I think it was Paul who rushed him and got his attention, where he took his attention off of me, and I was able to recuperate that feeling, stop that emotion that he was able to pull out of me, which kind of really surprised me. I've had that happen before.
What emotion was it that he was purging from you?
A feeling of I don't know. It's like a feeling of sadness, I think, which was weird. I guess that's about as close as I can describe it.
Yeah, because with a lot of these characters, I mean, like any body form, the body form is always a reflection of the consciousness. So the more distorted and twisted and abrasive and ill-intended the consciousness is, usually that affects in the reflecting body form. So with these sort of reptilian forms and these various entities and strange demonic creatures, I mean, generally they are as they are according to their consciousness. And so, you know, so when you see these characters, you can usually get a good indication of the sort of conscious they are simply by what they visually appear to be. So,
well, I've never seen that anything like that. I guess I'm weird. Oh, what do you guys think about all that Mars stuff I'm sending you? Nobody's going to complain about it yet?
I haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
Some of that stuff is mind-boggling. It's amazing that's going on.
You think it can't be simulated or?
Well, there's
staged?
Probably some of it's probably simulated.
Staged, no?
But there's some you can't. there's this big thing. It looks like it's a car from the future, like 5,000 years ahead of us. I got on that. I mean, the design and the way it's put together, it's just, I mean, you got to see that one. And then last night I'm laying in bed and I'm watching this stuff, and it showed this ocean, and it was a large ocean, and it said the last words was which was strange. It says something about alligators. And I thought, why would they put that in? And then I thought, well, what they're doing, they're trying to draw your attention to what you're looking at, to force you to look and see where's those alligators in that water. And the ocean was, you could see the rolling ocean. I mean, this, I've been trying to find it and I can't find it. There's a lot of stuff going on there that's absolutely amazing. And we paid for it. We paid for all of that. And the technology they got there, we paid for that. And we're being cheated out of all of that. I sent you a picture just recently. They look like they're doing brickwork. And this guy's in this floating, looks like a little car. And he's sitting in front of it and he's right there. And I'm trying to see, is that real? Because it looks real. And it says it's part of the Mars thing. So you guys are going to have to tell me if you really think that some of this stuff is fake, because it don't look fake. And sound, a lot of it has good, that sound of what Mars sounds like. It's like a whistling wind. And a lot of those, that's where they're at. But then others, they put music and things like that in. And it kind of covers the sound. So it's a little bit more difficult to decide if it's real. Looks real to me, though.
Well, it's like Tartaria or flat Earth. We're looking into these things, but what does it really matter? It's still creation. And we're looking.
Well, because they got our technology. We can use that to clean up the atmosphere. We can use that to make to raise our foods easier. It's just all that technology is there.
Yeah,
to make our lives a little bit better.
They've always had that. I mean, reptilians. I mean, or they've developed it. It's there. Yeah, it's there. But again, it's still creation, technology.
Well, unfortunately, we live in it.
Yeah.
We have to live in it.
Yeah. And one thing I just wanted to throw this into is kind of fun. We watch a lot of movies, and it's usually the bad guys chasing the good guys chasing the bad guys. I mean, and usually the good guys are part of the cabal, basically, or the Queen. James Bond being sent out by the Queen. I mean, he's working for the Queen, and so the cops are working for the system, which is corrupt. But it's kind of interesting how the hide and seek play out, and how people are able to hide themselves through magic or whatever, clever devices. It's kind of fun to watch that, for me at least. I always like it when the bad guys get away with something. In this particular movie, Anon, they were watching through his eyes. They were able to hack his system, hack him. So they were watching him. He was being actually accused of the murders eventually. The police were watching him through himself. So he closed his eyes and started, so they couldn't see what he sees, but then he physically went down to this guy who was doing a stakeout on him, opened his eyes, saw him, and popped him, So there's different ways of getting around these things. It's kind of neat. And the controllers have figured out, what we're going to do. They always seem to be ahead of people. They know their responses because the reptilians have lived so long. They know how people are going to respond, or the beings that they're controlling are going to respond. So they watch us. It's all about, social engineering and MK Ultra, but it's kind of neat to see if you can outwit them, like Kevin doing on the real side. Just basically awareness. You don't have to even be clever or anything. It's awareness supersedes everything. So you have more options if you're aware. So that's one of the benefits of being aware. So you see the bigger picture, and you don't have to use tricks or magic or being clever. You can just be creative and use that part of the isness to survive with and be better off.
Yeah, well, there was quite a good movie called Minority Report, I think the name was, with Tom Cruise, where they had this technology everyone was interfaced and connected with, which allowed that they could determine crimes they hadn't yet committed. And this was obviously based on this computer's ability to read their intent or the ideas they were generating, which later would motivate them and have them carrying out certain acts. And just like it is on the real side, the moment you have a thought, or the moment you think something, or you have an intent, it is instantly so, as everything is in reality, but it takes the time it does to filter through to the physical. And so this computer, in a way, and this computer interface was a similar sort of thing as the real awareness, where it could determine all ideas of intentionality, which are in effect now, but as I said, wouldn't be so until they filtered through to the physical and went through the various sequences and stages to manifest there. And so this computer system was basically able to, prevent crimes from occurring before the individual would actually take action on the physical to make them so. And so, but again, just like in the movie you described, it was open to abuse and manipulation, where I think they set up the main character, Tom Cruise, and had him basically what would have been the intentionality of another mass murderer they put onto his timeline or something, and so he was accused of a crime and he had to go on the run and then clear his name. So, that's another thing along similar lines.
And everything's in the now, so really the timeline doesn't exist in reality. So the real guides have access to this nowness, and that's how they can see the bigger picture, see the intent of a person, see where he's going, how, seeing the path he's on, and seeing how they can adjust it to the benefit of the person and everybody else, benefit of the whole. So the bigger picture, they have that. What we're doing with them, with real guides right now, I mean, it's been set up, prepared for us for who knows how long. We've been with the real guides. I mean, it could have been them for hundreds of lifetimes, just for this moment to be here, to have this opportunity to work with them. And there's so much more, that we have to become aware of as we go through the process of waking up. The main thing is keep at it. Don't quit. It's about stamina, endurance. So just do what you do. Take it step by step. Don't force it. Don't get ahead of yourself. But just keep at it, and then see how it works for you, the process, and then you'll be okay.
I've been having these young ladies contact me through Skype, and I just had a long conversation with one last night, and I tried to just get her to understand where we're coming from. So I sent her some of Dwayne's stuff, and then I have to see what comes out of that. These gals, I don't know where in the hell they're coming from, but there's about 5 or 6 of them that's been trying to bug me, and I keep telling them, hey, I'm an old man. You're gonna have to find somebody younger. And so I don't know how some of these gals are in Africa. We're everywhere. So this stuff that you may not think you're getting to anybody, but we're getting to somebody because it's because of the reaction we're getting. I would think. I don't know.
Yeah, it's always fun to the marketers and stuff to deal with them and see if they want to become more aware, you know, have some fun with them. Even if you know they're scamming you, you can just tell them, you know, you want to do better, or you know, just kind of play along and see if they want to, you know, see something more than what they're doing. Same with the girls or anybody.
You know, I had an individual contact me through my YouTube channel, and he said he'd watched some of the videos, and in my videos in the description, I always put links to the new books 2 and 6 and various other things, various other books. And he said he'd been reading through those, and he said to me, "Oh, this is all very interesting, and exciting." He said, "Is this some sort of computer game like Dungeons and Dragons?" He said to me. I had to explain to him, "No, it's actually, you know, these are actually references which point to the, you know, the place we're at being a creational simulated realm, and the idea is to recognize it as that and then recognize the is from the comparison it provides." I sort of said it in the simplest terms possible, but he literally thought what we were presenting was some sort of strange online computer game role playing or something. So it's quite interesting how people's take on it. So but anyway,
That's the problem, trying to figure out how to break it in, and you know, how to get them to start to think, to get them out of the pattern they're in, and try to bring them to at least try to think about where you're coming from. And I don't know how else to do it. It's almost like you throw a word out there and then see what happens. I don't know what else you can do.
well, Dwayne always says when the individuals are ready, they will come to you. And so it's not really a case of chasing them around, because I found I did that in the past. You sort of try and chase people around, but if they're fixated with their own ideas, you'll just go nowhere with it, because so you're hitting up against a brick wall. So Dwayne always recommends it's far better just to put the information out and let them come to you, because if they've come to you, and obviously there's something within them that has sparked or nudged them into approaching you, and they're in the first place. And so evidently they're in a position where they're at least ready to at least look at the material you're presenting. But very often times, if you chase them, they're maintaining and being locked in their own ideas, and so there's no way you can get through to them. Anyway, so the second experience. In this real side experience, I was with a group, and our location was within a very tall and very science fiction looking metallic tower that had been erected in a dense jungle, yet the height of which was such that it extended skyward far beyond the tallest tree. The tower consisted of a cylindrical base that must have been thousands of feet high. At the top of this metal base was a platform that was encased in a translucent dome, so it would rather have the appearance of a gigantic metal mushroom, if you can but picture this. It is in the domed section at the top that my group and I were. It was a very high-tech setup also, technology of a great sophistication, lots of twinkly lights, etc. It also seemed to be a tower that was the property of the dark forces, as was my impression, and we had rather made our way through the forest where it was standing, and had broken in, winding our way up through the tower in whatever form that took, stairs, an elevator perhaps more likely, due to the sci-fi nature of the structure, but that part I never was shown. Maybe we just beamed straight in, with real awareness, you can just hop and skip from scene to a location without the laborious necessity of travelling from point to point. But we each had some artifact or other that had facilitated our entry. My impression was that these were also a technology of a kind that were required to access this tower, some form of key or other. For whatever reason, I had misplaced mine, but I had the impression that each key could only be used once, then they no longer were functional, and it follows then that I must have used my key to access this tower, so we didn't just beam in after all. That we each had a key suggested we may be returning here again, or perhaps the other keys were required for other places. One of the functions of this tower seemed to be as some kind of a broadcasting system, as though used by the dark forces to transmit some frequency or other that probably wasn't beneficial to anybody but the controllers and their continued restriction of creation agenda. It rather reminded me of the setup where the reptilians use Saturn as a station for transmitting frequencies that bombard the Earth, that also maintains the control of humanity. Seems we then had taken possession of this particular tower, and were using it to transmit our own messages in frequency form. It's difficult to describe how we did this, but we knew how to operate the tech, and we all had folders of information we were translating into a frequency form and broadcasting through this tower to wherever it would reach. Again, the real awareness was rather handling the particulars. My folder of information to be transmitted across the frequency waves was real side experience orientated, and we each had our own respective informations we were transmitting from this tower. We also were armed with these curious swords that were especially designed and suited for this area of the real side we were in, as though this place was home to a particular variety of a creature that only these swords could dispatch, as this was rather hostile territory. And maybe this explains the reason for the choosing of this dangerous location for this dark forces tower, to discourage anyone from approaching and attempting to breach it. More than that, the swords represented the real awareness standing required to handle ourselves, the requisite degree of real awareness that would assure our safety in this region. And then we would be beset upon by one of the very creatures that these swords were symbolically representing the required real awareness standing to deal with. It looked like a kind of a fire demon, its body made of rock and engulfed in a fierce flame, a little like, I suppose, a fire elemental, even though the platform was encased in a protective dome, it seems it was more an energy field that would not prevent individuals passing through its surface. For this fire demon must have clambered up the huge tower and was now lunging through the surface of the dome. I would unleash my sword and embed it in the creature's rock-like body. This was all that was needed to defeat the creature, and it would roar in anguish, then fall back through the dome's surface, with my sword still lodged in its body, to the forest below. We also were alerted to the fact that we had somehow drawn the attention of the dark forces. They had detected our presence here, and were coming. Our real awareness, acting like a real side sixth sense of all things untoward and impending, overseeing all of creation as it does. We decided to evacuate the tower, the scene switched, and we were back in the jungle again, making our way through it to wherever we were choosing as our destination. So another example of dark force tech on the real side, but like all technology, it can be used for ill purposes or beneficial ones. The scene switched, and my group and I were deep into another assignment or operation on some old street or other that had the appearance of a series of houses, and the buildings you might have seen in, say, the Victorian era here on Earth. I'm uncertain what we were doing. At one point, however, it's as though one of these buildings that represented entry points had been rigged, for we were entering the grounds of an ancient church, and I would suddenly have the sense of a trap or other. A real awareness heads up. I would alert the group, and we all hastily vacated the church grounds and assumed a safe position nearby. As we watched, there would be a terrific explosion, and the church would collapse in on itself. It was as though the dark forces had left us a little surprise. Perhaps they had knowledge of this operation we were undertaking. Maybe along the lines of a dark forces bomb, not unlike the ones a group and I had produced in another real side experience where we were robots and scattering the opposition with little handheld explosives. Dwayne would say that this was more so awareness that we were promoting than an actual bomb, and that the dark force opposition there were removed, suggested they could not stand in the face of individuals operating from a place of real awareness standing protection and doing that which makes sense with the whole of life. This, then, would be almost like an anti-making sense and anti-real awareness, personal self, dark force version, just like bullets represent ideas, and if they hit you, you are agreeing with them. Then this would be one almighty dark force idea that we evidently recognized consciously and we did not agree with. We evaded the blast.
That experience I had about 2 years ago, I think. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, how we interpret these experiences, always try to relate it to the isness, or to the bigger picture, and then you can get it, you can kind of see it. And it's about seeing things, not trying to figure it out literally, but seeing it. That's why, these experiences are good, and to listen to others and how they view it, because we get different viewpoints in the same experience, and that gives us again another alternative, bigger view of the whole thing. And that's what we're here for, to see the bigger picture. That's what we're doing in the simulator here. We're trying to get the bigger picture, and to see if we can wake up and then help wake up others to what's going on. Very simple. And then making sense of things too. That's every time I hear something like that, I mean, I take it in literally, but then it comes around to where, gee, I really see what they're seeing. I see what it means really in a bigger sense, not just literal, but it's very real. Real universe is really, you hear it literally, but then it's very real when you see it. Your real awareness. You can hear it, well, yeah, I'm the real awareness, but then when you see it, then it's very real. It makes a whole lot of difference. Seeing things as opposed to like literally thinking you know it. So you're aware of it, and then you perceive it, and then you have this position again of just this expanded position, and then you go from there, and it keeps on prolificating itself as long as you keep going. It's really cool. Ron, you think?
I think another way, just saying, you just know. There's no question in your mind. That's maybe it's for me, that's the easiest way to answer it.
To me, yeah. Well, to me, it goes, I see what you're saying. To me, it's beyond just knowing, because that's still, I don't know anything. I take it from that position. I don't know anything. But then when I see it, then it becomes real. But if I just know it, then, yeah, I know it, as opposed to what? I don't know it. But if I see it, well, it exists. It just is. So that's, to me, that works for me. Just seeing it, it just doesn't matter what I believe or think or know. I see it. So it's real to me. But again, take it beyond the literal side of what you think that means, and to really see something and perceive it. I think that's what the real guides are getting at here, to see, to see and perceive. And I try not to use the word I think or I believe or things like that. I try to use I see, I see things, or I try to use words and to their full advantage, so I can understand it better than others.
That's what you hear when people say, I believe, I have my faith, and you ask them, have you been there? Have you crossed over? Have you actually experienced it? That's when you're comfortable in your own skin. That's the easiest way I can say it.
Yeah, just be real. Even if you believe in something really strongly, just if they're real and sincere, I mean, they'll see it eventually if they keep going. But if they stop and are so self-convinced about something, then they probably won't, until they're real with their belief and sincerity. They really want to. If they're really sincere, they're really, life will show them eventually. But if they're self-convinced, then they're blocking themselves, and life from showing them. Okay, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ron, for being here. Good show, and we'll see you around the neighborhood on the real side. NUUU. Ron?
You.
Kevin?
NUUU.